The Lorith have been traveling the stars for as long as our records have been kept. The time before has almost been forgotten. We have met many species in our travels, all of them so very different yet still the same. While their bodies and culture all were varied, one true theme remained a constant. They were harmonious in nature. What I mean by that is every evolved sentient species we have come across who have managed to reach space have been very passive in nature. This includes ourselves. For example, my species developed the ability to mimic the pheromones, sounds, and body language of near every animal on our planet, allowing us to effectively communicate with any would-be predators. This eliminated any real need my species had to be violent or ferocious. Strength was also not needed nor speed, for we could lure any prey we needed with ease. With our need for sustenance met, and our fear of being eaten gone, we naturally turned to technology far earlier than most. The Lorathian race quickly became the dominant species, and with our already passive nature and our ability to understand each other bordering on telepathy, crime was almost unheard of, and when it did occur, it was petty in nature. Then there are the Zokal small furry creatures that live on a densely atmosphered tropical world, who rely solely on their one true mind for their sentience. This hive mind, a larger and significantly slower version of the smaller Zokal, developed the ability to organically broadcast radio waves, which the other Zokal pick up via a bony protuberance on their foreheads. While the smaller individual Zokal have their own personalities and identities, each one depends on the hive mind for deep memory storage and critical thinking. The Zokal too live in harmony, and violence is not even in their method of thinking, as their planet held no real predators, and competition during their development was non-existent. With the unifying force of a hive mind, their entire society could be put to work on any single project. They too reached space quickly enough, and the Zokal had no competition for habitable worlds, as they could survive on worlds that most others didn't want anyway. There are thousands of other species that I could name, but I wish to get to the matter at hand. Suffice it to say that all of the space-faring races, and those soon to be counted among them all, have developed a way to be peaceful among themselves and those around them. Sure, we found death worlds. Plenty of them, in fact. However, after our first landing on one, we quickly abandoned the idea of dwelling on them, as not even our method of passive contact could fool them into not killing us. The indigenous species were always deadly and highly competitive, killing each other and themselves off too fast to ever produce a sentient species, let alone a spacefaring one. Or so we thought, until that fateful day we visited a small blue planet, the third from its sun in the now named Sol system. When we first found them, they were already well into their space age, though they lacked FTL at the time. Their ships were still propelled with nuclear engines, not too common of a choice, but not unheard of. They had colonized their moon and had begun terraforming on the fourth planet in their system, as well a red barren planet called Mars. We were already well versed in first contact procedures and sent the usual drone Envoy to where our information officer claimed their capital to be. Now, you see, it had long been operating procedure to collect the history of new contacts before starting any kind of diplomatic relations. However, after thousands of years, and just as many species with no mishaps, we had cut it down to just identifying their leaders, if there were any, and contacting them directly. Seeing as we had stopped worrying about any sentient species being hostile long ago. However, we could only access so much information. For some reason, much of their network was protected, something we had never seen before. We just simply couldn't access anything but the most basic of subjects. It should have been our first warning. As our envoy neared their planet, it began to collect data of its own accord, using it to get the translator up to speed. It sent back reports of the atmosphere, and we were not surprised. Nothing too out of the ordinary. However, once it touched down on the planet in front of the giant white domicile that the reports claimed to be their leader's home, alarms began to blare. Not only was the envoy detecting high-speed projectiles, but the biologic data coming back from the air samples was insane. Not minutes on the ground, and it was already detecting over 100 different strains of bacterium and virus that were Category 7 biohazards. The scale goes up to 7, those being classified as world-ending threats. The zoologic data from the planetary scans were not different. Damn near every animal on the planet was deadly in one fashion or another. We saw videos of humans sprinting, lifting weight many times their own, eating other animals that would have killed us in seconds, and they did it all for fun. We were dealing with the first sentient death worlders. This should have been our second warning. We thought perhaps our envoy had triggered some sort of self-defense mechanism similar to the corpus species broodmothers, who would evacuate biohazards and launch large spines at potential threats, and watched as our drone automatically performed countermeasures to avoid the exhaust trailing objects. Oh, well, that's the reason first contact was with the drones. To avoid loss of life. We were so naive. You can imagine the shock when our drone's countermeasures failed, as the projectiles changed direction to follow blowing it to pieces. We had never witnessed anything like it. The information officer was the first to point out that our scans of the projectile confirmed that they were artificial in nature, made by the indigenous population. We were baffled as to why any creature would make such things. These explosive drones were like nothing we had imagined. It was when we were preparing the second drone for flight that the message came. Our information officer had the equivalent of confusion painted on his face as a light blinked on his data feed. He claimed we were receiving a call from the species down below us. This, too, was a first. Often enough, the first probe was met with great welcome, as any intelligent species rejoiced at having yet another harmonious brother in the stars. None had ever contacted us first, especially after a failed envoy mission. It was curious, but we didn't realize how bad the situation was. I asked for the transmission to be put on our communal screen for all to see and hear. As the video took over the feed, we were all shocked. Several predators faced us, their forward-facing eyes, almost hairless skin, and their bipedal posture. It all screamed danger to us. It took all I had not to cut the feed. Then our shock grew when the one in the middle, a pale white thing dressed in what I now understand to be their formal wear, spoke. Predators had never had an oral language above grunts and bestial sounds. I am the 43rd elected president of the United American Europact, Andrew Pruitt, and as of 20 minutes ago, the elected representative of the human race. Please identify yourself and state your intent, or will be forced to take your landing of a ship on private government property as a statement of war and dispatch you with extreme prejudice. The other now named humans in the room nodded somberly at this last statement. I was informed by my officers later that those men had been wearing several uniforms, all representing different branches of what the humans call their military. My words caught in my throat momentarily. The shock of hearing predators speak, let alone with such clarity, even through the translator, was massive. I glanced at my people on the bridge to see quite a number of mandibles hanging open in surprise. I was proud none had fled in fear. I cleared my thorax and spoke. I am Boren, lead engineer and biologist for the Undiscovered Species Expeditionary Team, fielded by the Lorith race. We mean no harm to you or your property, and are simply here to help introduce you to the cosmos. However, you seem to have me at a disadvantage. Our translator appears to be malfunctioning. Several terms came out wrong. Perhaps you can clarify? I wish I had never spoke the words that came next. I wish I had ordered my team gone at the sight of these things. Maybe they would have killed themselves off, these humans, before they reached us. The humans on the other end of the video visibly relaxed, or so our body language processors suggested at my introduction. They bared their teeth, causing a few of the least brave members of my crew to scurry from the room. Luckily, all of the lore stayed, our natural ability picking up that it was a sign of happiness, not a threat. The self-identified leader spoke again. All right then, Boren, I'm no scientist, but I'll do what I can until our lead men in every field get here. So long as an armada of battleships don't appear behind you, we have agreed to share what information we can. I should have caught it then, the paranoia, something none of us ever had when dealing with the other species of the galaxy. My information officer came over and whispered into my auditory stalk, "We have a lot of energy activity coming from the planet, sir, and it all seems to be directed at us. We are being scanned, and there are some frequencies we don't recognize as being useful for anything but positioning. Their ships have also been recalled to the nearest ports." I waved him away, not seeing the danger, the obvious threat. None of us saw it. We weren't trained to look for it. Well, you see, Andrew Pruitt, 43rd elected president of the United American Europact, some terms came out garbled, such as war, prejudice, and battleship. I tried my best to pronounce the words, but my mandibles could only do so much. All the humans in the room looked confused for a moment, then conferred with each other while we waited. The one called Andrew looked at us again in an untrusting manner and spoke. "There is no problem with your translator. Those are words. Do you mean to tell me your species and the others that are out there are not familiar with the concept of war?" I looked at the men behind the human called Andrew, and they were smiling as the translator informed me and my crew, and very widely at that. We couldn't smell them, but I swear I could taste their pheromones shouting joy and confidence. We should have run. Nervous now, I responded, hoping our translator didn't convey the tremor in my voice. The tension on the bridge was unreal. The smell of fear was thick and nauseating. I think we knew then, but didn't want to face it. Something was very, very wrong with the species. "No, we aren't, President Andrew. Perhaps you could enlighten us? After all, we were sent here to learn all we can about you and help you ascend to the stars." All the humans smiled at that. I thought at the time that I had impressed them, perhaps put them at ease, filled them with hope. What we all couldn't see was the evil, the pure elation in those forward-facing eyes. The human leader spoke. "General Jonathan, would you be so kind as to send all unclassified information on our history of war to the good Mr. Bourne and his team? I believe they are in for a treat." The whole crew watched as the now identified General Jonathan indicated off-screen, and another human dressed in a similar uniform ran to him, conversed with him in hushed tones, and hurried off again. The General Jonathan spoke in a booming voice quite different to the president's. "You will receive a data packet momentarily." Sure enough, within 2 of our millicycles, or 4.5 human minutes, 8.9 terabytes of information was transferred to our ship. I brought the file up on the screen, splitting it between the file and the video feed from the humans. With much trepidation, I opened the file only to have it start an automatic slideshow beginning with the human definition of war, which was as follows. War is a state of armed conflict between societies. It is generally characterized by extreme collective aggression, destruction, and usually high mortality. The set of techniques and actions used to conduct war is known as warfare. An absence of war is usually called peace. Total war is warfare that is not restricted to purely legitimate military targets and can result in massive civilian or other non-combatant casualties. I felt the color drain from my eyes, indicating my need to vomit. Just the idea alone was sickening, nerve-wracking. Then the pictures came, humans in black, and white pictures appeared first in all states of death, disease, and disrepair. Mountains of bodies, lakes of blood. We had never even imagined death on such a scale was possible, let alone seen it. Then the color pictures came, and with them different articles, and words each more terrible than the last. Genocide, work camps, slaughter, massacre, extermination, murder, serial killer, rapist, and more. None of my crew made it through the slideshow without vomiting or expelling fear pheromones till they passed out. My eyes kept switching back and forth between the unspeakable things that were being displayed to me and the grinning faces of the humans. I didn't even notice they had started speaking again. The president's voice finally reached me and the crew when someone finally shut off the slideshow. "Well, I guess you weren't lying, Mr. Bourne. Your people really do seem to have no stomach for this type of thing." I was at a loss for words brought on by the addition of so many new ones to my vocabulary. I stared at the creatures before me, these humans. My stomach retched at the thought of their name. The one called Andrew continued. "You know we have been waiting to make contact with someone for some time, Mr. Bourne. Of course we thought they would be a bit more like us. In fact, that little packet was one of our many plans in case of hostile first contact. We hoped it would intimidate anyone wanting to screw with us. However, after reviewing your information logs, while you were watching our little show, my generals informed me you don't have a military. Actually, none of you do. As a matter of fact, you didn't have a concept of the military until about 5 minutes ago." My head swam. Military, organization of destruction, killers. "General, leader of killers. It was all new. It was all wrong. They had used our confusion to tap into our data logs. This was all so wrong. The general called Jonathan spoke, gaining my attention with his commanding voice. Mr. Borant, your ship must be faster than light capable, I am sure. Would that technology happen to be part of the information you wish to share with us? We didn't seem to find it on your files. My eyes went from clear to the pitch black of panic. Of course they didn't get the schematics. It was on a solid data drive with the prototypes they give to newly uplifted species. I decided at once they could never have it. They couldn't be allowed to spread. Their inharmonious nature, their madness, their chaos should never leave their system. I faced a general with all the courage I could muster, matching his body language, standing tall on my hind legs, just as my ancestors must have done in ancient times, when squaring against the Kaloed Plain stalkers in an attempt to dissuade them from attacking. I think the old ones would have been proud of me. Of course, if I had been human, I could have easily lied my way out, at least I like to think so. Too bad our species never had the need to lie. General Jonathan, I'm afraid I cannot release this information to you. As a matter of fact, I refuse. We cannot let a species such as yours into the stars. Words flashed through my mind, prejudice, elitist. I shook them from my head. It wasn't the same. The general smiled this time. The translator picked it up after being exposed to all those pictures. Pure hunger. Confidence. That smile contained so much. Well then, Mr. Bourne, I regret to inform you that we are no longer asking. As of now, you are being detained and your ship confiscated. We will not be left in the dark just because a bunch of hippies in the sky decide we want to play nice with others. My mind raced. Detained? More words flooded my mind. Camp, prison, dissection, experimentation. No. I cut the feed of the video and screamed to my pilots, "Jump now. I don't care where, get us out of here." That was when I felt the first impact. More of their rockets delivered from the ships who had snuck up behind us while we were distracted by the video feed. Only these didn't explode, but instead used some magnified electrical pulse to disable us. Our engines were crippled, but they could still use them to build their own, and the drive was still intact. I thought of destroying the drive and all the equipment I could, but with what? We had no weapons, and the tools we had on hand couldn't do enough damage quick enough. These thoughts didn't last long anyway, because the second and third impacts rocked the ship, one of them being directly on the bridge's hull. The resulting explosion made me think I was to be sucked into vacuum, but the pressure change never came. Instead, humans poured forth from the hole in the wall, all covered in armor similar to the Erie miners, and holding what I recognized as the human rifles from the data show, all their faces hidden behind blank helmets. I watched as they kicked my crew to the floor. Gods, they moved so fast, so precise, their blows sending each and every man and woman to the floor. I had never seen anything like it. Not even the dreaded plane stalkers moved with such speed. As the smoke cleared, the humans began binding my crew and tossing them into the transport attached to the new hole in my ship. My crew screamed for mercy, for compassion, but it was met with rough orders of "Shut up, Zeno," or a simple boot to the face. The poor ensign who received the latter squeaked as his neck bent at an unnatural angle and fell still. This sight of brutal execution would have me visiting therapists for the rest of my years, yet the human laughed. It was the first time I would hear that terrible sound, but not the last. The translator on the bridge was still doing its job till the end. The human chuckled, and said, "Damn, these Xenos sure do break easy. Have to be more careful, guys. If we kill the engineer for the ship's Sarge is going to kill us all." He laughed at this as well. It was then they came for me. I would like to say I fought. I would like to say they had to beat me to the ground, but I can't. They hauled me up, bound my 4 limbs with plastic, and shoved me into their boarding pod. I found out later that they have specially designed vehicles designed just for the occasion of invading an enemy's ship and taking the vessel with minimal damage to the ship. Apparently, humans also love to reuse and capture things. We never had a purpose, as we always shared what we had going so far as to build ships for new races. They brought us down to Earth and questioned us. I tried to hold out as long as I could, but they introduced us to so many new concepts, torture being the main one. True to their word, they tore apart the ship, reverse engineering it with the help of the onboard engineer, and within 3 years had their first FTL-capable ship. In those 3 years, me and my crew were held in the most appalling conditions, and I watched as one of each species of my crew disappeared only to return bearing scars and vacant expressions. Most of them didn't survive long, and the ones who did told of the things that were done to them. I dare not repeat them even now. The rest, as you know, is history. Armed with the knowledge from our data banks and their new FTL battleships, they took to the heavens that had once inspired hope and awe to so many and now are only a source of fear and dread, bringing only the thoughts of humans and their terrible power. My interrogators and wardens kept me up to date on the events outside that hole they kept us in, if only to break me further. The first to fall were the Zokul, the poor things. Humans seemed to have designed each of their attacks for whoever they were conquering. They killed all of the one true minds from orbit and simply herded the rest into giant camps where they were processed and sold as pets. Apparently, without the hive mind, they are very similar to the humans' rabbits, except they can be taught more advanced tricks. They are as big as their medium dogs, and their horn is deemed cute. They also live as long as humans do, so it was considered better than having a pet that would die long before the owner. They kept one Zokul planet populated, so they wouldn't run out of them. How generous. Unfortunately, the rest of the species weren't as lucky. Systematic extermination seemed to be all that was left for them if they weren't deemed useful, and slavery when they were. I wept in my cage every day as the guards brought news of another conquered planet or another species eradicated, many of whom I had discovered myself. The human soldiers bragged about how entire units would make planetfall and never fire around. They would simply use their blades to cut swaths through the local populace or even their bare hands. Finally came the day when they found the last race, my race. The Lorth had retreated when news of the humans spread. We isolated ourselves from what I am told to try and avoid or eventual demise. I'm proud to say we even put together an army of sorts, made some crude weapons, and even littered our system with mines designed to crack open human ships. The poor fools didn't know that it would just make things worse. So far the humans had met little to no resistance, sustained limited casualties. No one had pissed them off. They were just being human, taking what they thought was theirs. When the battle came, the general from nearly a decade ago found me in my cell. He looked younger than I remembered then. I thought of all the medical tech they must have found, and realized they must be using it on themselves now. He tossed a data pad at me and said, "I think you might want to see this. It's live from your home system. We are currently making landfall. You boys have balls, I'll tell you that. I even respect you a little for it. First soldiers I've seen. Too bad your minds killed a war hero. The Joes are never going to forgive you for it." With that, he turned his back and left, and I watched the tiny screen in passive horror as my system was overrun, my people shot and enslaved, then the entirety of the system glassed. With that, my soul died forever, and so did the harmony of the universe. So now here I sit on one of their penal worlds where they send the species they don't need or want to farm their food for them. It's not so bad here besides the odd human who comes by to kill us because he can snap our necks just to feel it, or see how easy it is to crush our skulls in his hand just because his soldier father told him he did it in the war. They even let me have this data slate to write my memoirs on and have agreed to publish it if I waive any property rights to it. I hope this reaches someone who cares, or even better is read by a much more careful species from far, far away and saves them from our fate. We were the Lorth, and we once traveled the stars.